to start this.
I don't know, man. It's your thing. You figure it out. I don't know. We can sit here and do like 6 million takes. It'll be fine. We got this.
6 million takes. That seems ridiculous. I'm just going to use this opening. Is that all right? Me just saying dude. I don't know how to start it.
I guess this is the beginning.
Yes. Welcome to the Tales of Dahlia, a D&D podcast that is not a live play podcast, which is different than pretty much every other D&D podcast that I've ever seen, at least. So I'm Austin, joined by my friend Sarah.
Hello.
And so I guess just to kind of kick it off, I mean, this is kind of just what happens when I'm currently in the second campaign of a big world that I created a long time ago. And we have a bunch of players in this campaign that weren't in the first one. So this is just a good way of us kind of going over the lore and everything that happens about the world. And correct me if I'm wrong, because like I really hope that I'm right here, but I know that you've told me multiple times that like I, at least as a DM for the group that we have been doing a good job. So every single time, we have all these sort of different things of the like my DM style and the way that I do things and stuff, and we're probably just going to start covering that as well when it comes up and when it goes kind of like hand in hand with the lore bits that we're talking about for the actual world itself.
Yeah, I mean, I have no complaints, I guess. Not today. Maybe tomorrow,
Yikes. We're not even playing tomorrow. No, you can't complain tomorrow. That's your complaint.
Find something.
We're just not playing. Yeah.
That's my complaint, that we're not having session. That's it.
That's fair.
There you go. That's usually my complaint, in fairness.
This is basically just a product of what happens when you ask your DM for lore about his world, and he's like, you know what, I'm going to do you one better. You should always ask your DM about the lore of their world. If it's their homebrew world, I guarantee you they will talk for hours and they will love it.
Can confirm.
Yeah, that's just what this is. So the problem is that I will talk for hours to a point where you know more information than you probably should.
I know.
But a good thing that I've done is grabbed players that don't mix player knowledge and character knowledge, so it's been all right.
I have way too much player knowledge. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, well, so I've always looked at D&D as collaborative storytelling. So it's better when the person you're writing the story with knows where the story is going and the different things about the world. And like you specifically, but also like every other player in our group, at least for the most part, is very good about keeping player and character knowledge separate. So they do a good job of being like, well, I don't know that information. Like I do personally, but I cannot do that, in the game because I don't know that information, that kind of thing.
Well, and I think it helps just because we all have kind of similar. We all are there to tell a good story. Like the combat is definitely more favored by some people than others, but we're all there to just be badass and have a story that we can look back on fondly and to sit down at the table and I mean, do cool shit like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's 100% what it is, yeah.
And having, when we're talking about, if you talk about writing a book, you're the author, you're the only one who knows where the story is going to go, beginning to end, and your readers are really sort of this separate entity. They're separate from the story. They don't know what's going to happen. They don't have any knowledge, and don't have any input, right? But D&D isn't a book. It isn't players living out a story through a DM. It's a DM guiding a story, and like you said, it's collaborative. So, I've never thought having more knowledge than your character is necessarily a bad thing if it makes your character's story better. And as long as you're not spoiling, main plot points or anything like that, there's still that room for surprise and tension and kind of that shock value that everybody wants at the table, while also letting you build a cool story with your DM and alongside your DM, not just in the presence of your DM, I suppose, or in, their presence with you. So
yeah, I mean, and like I think the best description I've ever heard for D&D is like it's you and a group of friends sit around a table and write a movie together that you all get to act in, and you have an unlimited special effects budget, but no one else can ever live that world with you. Like the problem with D&D compared to like writing a book is that it's so hard for you to sit down and tell a story of something that happened at D&D and then other people to be as engaged as you were. And it's just because you and and like in our case, it's 4 friends, soon to be 5 friends, but like the 6 of us sitting around a table or whatever can look at a story and all get a different experience out of it. And it's so hard to describe that experience to somebody who was not at the table.
Yeah.
And
they're
that's
never
a big deal.
They never care, like, quite as much. Like, they might find it interesting, but, you know, when you tell someone about kind of going back to this analogy, when you tell someone about a book you've read, they can go pick that book up and read it and live that same experience. You can never have that at a D&D table, even if you're a recorded group like Critical Role or something like that.
It's very specifically Critical Role, where like they all experience that game so differently compared to everyone that's watching, even though everyone that's watching is seeing the same experiences and still loving that campaign, and the characters are lovable, and you know the story is great, and everything that goes on with it is awesome. No one is going to get the same experience as someone like let's say, for example, Laura Bailey, who sits at that table and experiences the game through her own eyes. So
well, yeah, and I mean, I think a prime example of this, just, you know, I haven't really personally been able to get super into Critical Role, but you know, I hear a lot of people who say, oh yeah, I listen to it on my drive into work, or oh, I put it on as background noise. I could never imagine with a campaign that I'm playing in and invested in, treating it like background noise, right? So I mean, there's a disconnect there. Actually sitting down, playing in the world, being invested, being an active living part of it, it's just a whole nother level. And, you know, so when you're talking about that collaborative storytelling aspect, it really can make I come to session every week and have a good time with my friends sort of scenario going into, this is something I absolutely value and, you know, wouldn't trade for the world event and commitment. And like that's what it's become for me. You know, it's not just a thing I go to every week. It's something I spend time on throughout the week, and it kind of culminates on Saturdays instead of just only existing in a bubble on Saturdays.
No, yeah, I completely agree. I think it's something that just people in general, I don't understand the idea of having like background noise. Like when I got into Critical Role, and I'm still not even through the first campaign because there's so much content. So like I don't blame anybody for not like getting into it or watching it or whatever. But like I had to sit down and watch it. I couldn't sit there and watch it and have it on my phone, like, or have like a game on my phone and like not pay attention to it. Like background noise just didn't work for me. And if like imagine sitting down at a D&D table, and I mean, we can go over this for future episodes because we definitely talked about this before, but like we have sat down at D&D tables playing in the first campaign where there were players that showed up and played on their phone the whole time, where like the game was background noise to them, like, and
it ruins only
the experience.
And it ruins it for everybody. And we can get into that with audience member players. That's a whole different episode.
Yeah, it really is. I mean,
but you know, that's the idea of collaborative storytelling really does enhance the game, and having your players invested in the world to the point where even they're helping build the world. Which, you know, kind of goes into the whole point of why I'm on this show, you know, why I'm co-hosting this with you. This no longer just feels like a world I play in. It feels like something I'm a part of, something that I've helped build, where my actions, both at the table and off the table, with ideas and thoughts and things, I've built something. I've assisted with something. It's almost like a legacy sort of feeling, where like this is cemented in this world's history, mythology, whatever. And that's something you don't get if your DM won't collaborate with you past, you know, small character things. So it's being a part of the greater whole. It's great. It's been fantastic. It's made this last year in particular just, I mean, amazing. It just doesn't compare to any of the other groups I've been in. So,
well, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, but I mean, aside from like listening to Sarah talk good things about me. Like this world
I'm
itself,
not kissing your ass or anything, I swear.
Yeah, okay. This world I created back when I was in high school, which is, I regret to say, over a decade ago, and I hate that. But it's one of those things where I created this world, and originally it was just the main city that everyone sort of starts in. It's the capital of the main continent and everything. But the rest of the world kind of grew over both campaign 1 and then campaign 2, and it has become much bigger than that, because originally when I built it, it was just a city, and then that city kind of evolved to like a surrounding region of a continent, and then we changed that. Like eventually that went to a full continent, and then now it's a world where there's other continents and islands and all sorts of things. And so like introducing that world here, I mean, the main city that we have now is currently called the Glass Keep, which is a city where, you know, there's a large spire in the center made of glass that is sort of the focal point of the entire region that can be seen from, you know, miles and miles away. And it exists in the region of a place known as Jermalo. And Jermalo is both a continent and a region on the continent, much like how Australia is both a country and a continent. And it is sort of surrounded by multiple places. But we're going to go further in depth with Jermalo later at a different episode. But for this one, we were just going to kind of introduce each of these areas. But when we talk about like collaborative storytelling, like this campaign specifically has done quite a bit of it where, and you can probably attest to this a lot, Sarah, where we have done things like the party has done things in the story that has completely influenced and changed the way that the world, and specifically like Jermalo as a whole, is.
Oh yeah, I mean, and I mean even to the point where it's not just Jermalo. I mean, our actions have consequences that directly influence the world, and have from day one, which, you know, having been present from campaign 1 into now campaign 2 and lived through the events, I mean, it's really cool seeing how things have changed. And that, you know, that collaborative aspect means something outside of just the moment. So, you know, the world literally changes, it evolves, it's a living, breathing thing, as opposed to just, you know, here you are on the map.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a board game aspect, which is like, I think one of like a big takeaway from D&D compared to like other board games, but like I think that D&D is a lot more I guess it's not really inclusive. I guess you just feel more involved. You feel like your character matters. You feel like you matter. You feel like everything, like as long as you have a way to interact with the world on more than just a board game type basis, where like you actually change things. I mean, like the difference between like the game Risk and Risk Legacy, right? Where like in Risk Legacy, you make decisions that change the board game as you move, and it's very similar to that, where there are consequences in every D&D campaign, but I don't think there's any consequences as great as some of the things that you guys have done in this campaign, which we'll get into later. Those are some bigger spoilers for people down the road. But when go ahead.
I think another thing to kind of compare it to, and this is a little bit of a side tangent about homebrew worlds, and what's been really nice about playing in the homebrew world instead of, you know, in Forgotten Realms, Faerun, or you know, Greyhawk, whatever. Playing in a world that you have created means that while there is canon lore, you don't have to worry about adhering to, okay, so we take the history of the Forgotten Realms, and certain events are canon to this world. Great thing about a homebrew world is we're making the canon, and there's nothing to adhere to, so it does allow a lot more collaboration, and it allows characters, you know, players, not to feel like they can't, for lack of a better phrase, fuck around and find out.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And I think that, like, so going back to like the world itself, a big example of what we have is we had a player who was able to write, like, I basically the main world, the explored realms of Dahlia, and you guys will have this on your screen so you guys can see this map and everything, but the explored realms of Dahlia have 4 main continents. There's Germalo, Pike, Bella, and Adonis. And I gave free reign of those continents and like their sort of lore, like some of their background lore and stuff. I was like, here's a paragraph that describes it. Here, you write the rest of it. And I handed it off to another player. And that other player ran with it and wrote a ton of lore on Adonis and a ton of lore on Pike. And then even you, there's the one thing I
got
said
to name
about,
Bella.
Yeah, you got to name
a
city
Hearth.
in Bella.
Yeah.
Because Bella is a continent full of animals and, you know, mostly dinosaurs, but like mostly animals. It's a very jungle type land where there's only like one major city. And so I let her name that city. And it comes down to more than just names in a lot of cases. But there's a lot of things where I was like, hey, here, do this, right? Like you very specifically wrote or are currently writing all of the lore for the 9 Hells because your character is so invested in them, or at least was.
Right.
But
was. Emphasis on was.
Invested in the 9 Hells quite a bit. And so I let her write all that lore. And I think that that's like a big thing that you can do when you're writing a world. Like I know that there is a system set up in Pathfinder, I think it's called like Kingmaker or something, where you sit down as a party and you don't know you don't like care about who the DM is or anything, but everyone has like a certain number of points and they can spend those points on adding specific races to the game, adding events to the game, that kind of thing. And so you get to write the backstory for the campaign that you live in, the world that you live in. And it's very similar to that where we've just done that in D&D here with my world. Like I gave everyone, I was like, here's Germalo. This is where you start. You will start here in the Glass Keep. Outside the Glass Keep, but that doesn't mean anything. But it was like Glass Keep is a big focal point. Here's the country you start in. Here's some of the locations around you, and then I just kind of ran with it. And a really big thing that I did, something that I love, and I think everyone should do if you're building a homebrew world and you don't have everything quite figured out, is play a couple sessions where the characters start helping you do that, because when we started, I had maybe 3 of the gods and the pantheons figured out. And after going for like a few sessions, I knew who the cleric worshipped. I knew who the bard worshipped. I knew obviously who your character worshipped. Like, yeah. I was like, here we go. Now I've got like a small basis. And then it was like, okay, throw it all together now. Make a pantheon full of gods that like are taken from all over the place. There's a few of there's a few from FR. There's a few from
I think there's definitely
Eberron.
Some from
there's a bunch
Eberron,
of Eberron. Yeah, because the Dark Six are Eberron, I believe.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yep, you're right.
And then the term the Sovereign Host is from Eberron as well. So like yeah, I mean obviously we'll go into further detail for that later. But what I'm stating is that I built my own pantheons for my world based on what deities my characters already worshipped after a couple sessions in. And we kind of established that later into the campaign versus beforehand. Because putting all that weight on a DM right away is it's too much. It's so much like responsibility to put on yourself that'll actually just hurt you in the long run, because it doesn't give players the feeling and like a way to input into the world. And I think that was like a really good, I really liked it. I really liked the way that it turned out. And even now that we're like going through campaign 2, we're starting to change some of those things. The pantheons are changing and the people in the world are changing. The NPCs are changing, all that kind of stuff. And so you guys are making it kind of grow, even though it started from effectively nothing and then existed after 4 sessions, and now it's just completely changing throughout the entirety of the campaign.
Well, and kind of speaking back to that technical point, I have tried and failed more than once to do my own world. It is a ton of work, and I think, at least for me, that's 100% been sort of this daunting idea of, okay, not only do I have to put land on a map, I have to design a culture, I have to design a religion, I have to come up with names, I have to come up with NPCs and people and events, and it's a huge task to build a world. And believe it or not, when you got 4 to 6 other people sitting around a table with you, they can do it for you. And you can get input from them. And like you said, it takes weight off your shoulders when you're like, oh, all right, 2 continents. I don't have to really think about too much or design, and we can do this together. Sweet. Let's go for it. So I think I would have had a better go at finishing off the world I started to create had I, considered that. Well, that's been like 6 years, but I can only imagine that not having to have designed Pike or Adonis past, the physical landmass and kind of
or
giving
like
it
the basic first paragraph of like, this is kind of what it is,
Yeah, no, and I mean, on top of it, when, talking about myself here, when it comes to the 9 hells, there's a lot. So having someone else hash through that, write that lore, or at least the important bits, get them down on paper, shove them in the Google Doc or the Google Drive folder that everyone can access, or, whatever. At the very least, it provides a base for you to build off of and not have to, do it all by yourself.
Absolutely.
So, benefits of collaborative storytelling continue.
I mean,
so
look at like a movie, any movie that comes out, like a blockbuster hit, right? Like the hit movie, B movie or whatever. I don't know, like something that's like, really good. Not the B movie.
Wait, hold on. Back up. I have questions.
No. So the hit movie, the B movie, was not written by one person, right? And I understand that like some movies there are some movies where one person writes it. They do all of that. They do the directing, they do the writing, especially as someone who's really into movies. Like I completely understand that does happen, but it's so few and far between. Most of the time you have, people who write and then other people that help write or give ideas, and they think tank things and then they write them down together. And that's just like, apply that logic to D&D. Like, why can't it be like that? You don't have to be the sole person to write the entire story, just be the person who's leading the group doing it, right?
Well,
and like that's what being I don't know about like saying it's what makes a good DM, but it's definitely what helps making a DM.
Well, and I mean, back to the movie analogy, a DM isn't just writing a story. A DM is creating a world, probably getting, art, getting a map made, doing riddles, it's kind of like expecting one person to be proficient in every single skill. That's not realistic.
It's like asking one person to be literally everything behind the scenes while the players are the actors in a movie.
Yeah. And that it just doesn't work. So having more people in your corner, more people building the world with you, not only makes a better story, not only invests your players, but is going to make your life as a DM easier and yield a better product. Because I feel like at the end of it all, when I DM'd, what I was looking for was something cohesive, something I could look back on and go, damn, that was a good time. And not just something I did alone. If I wanted to write a story alone, I'd write a book. I wouldn't have DM'd. I wouldn't be sitting at a table with, 5 other people now, or 4 other people, or, whatever. So, collaboration, A+.
It definitely changes things. I mean, granted, there are things that I did alone, right? Like first off, I named all the continents, by the way, as a DM, that is my most hated thing. I hate naming things.
Hey, Austin.
Bad.
Austin, do they have kids? What are their kids' names?
Every time. It's so frustrating. And like, I know some people are so good at that, right? Like, as a good example, Jerry Holkins from Penny Arcade, when they did the Acquisitions Incorporated things, they would always be like, hey, you have 3 people that are like leading you now, or like that are helping you in the company. They're like your assistants. What are their names? And he goes, and then he just spits out 3 names. Like he's like ready to go. And I'm like, how? How do you do that? And like, I know some people, it just comes naturally to them, and some people it doesn't, right? And then like some DMs are good at improvising, some DMs aren't. Some DMs are great at writing these fantasy awesome locations, and then their story might not be as good, or like whatever. Like every DM kind of has their strengths and weaknesses. My weaknesses is names. I can't do it. I don't know what it is.
I mean, you're not
So,
the worst. You've come up with a few gems. You know, a few. There's a handful in there.
there's a goblin named Hug Hug.
He's great. I love him.
Like it wasn't. I don't even know if it's my name. I don't remember.
I don't think it. I thought you said you pulled it from.
Well, it was
mine?
in campaign 1. You guys went through the mines of Fandelver.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's a goblin named Hug Hug in that like thing in that story or whatever. I just remember there being a goblin. I don't know if I named the goblin or not. I can't remember, honestly. It's been years, so I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't know, but I mean, we also had, I don't know where he is now, a wizard named Kyle. So like
Kyle Mortimer Fideli. What a wonderful dude. I can't wait until there's an actual person named that who listens.
Kyle Mortimer.
But
hey Kyle, if you're out there, we got you.
The party has no idea where you are. Please come home. Please,
we miss you. Your family
misses you.
They think you're dead, but it's fine.
And so, trying to get back on topic a little bit, it's like there is things that I did by myself. Like I took different planes of existence from the FR sort of like setup and everything, and put them together in this sort of cohesive collection that I kind of based around the plane of existence that everyone lives on. And then I obviously, I made the maps on Incarnate, by the way. Not a sponsor. Really wish they would. Incarnate's awesome. If you're not using it, I'll put a link in the description of this video, because they have a lot of wonderful tools for making maps and stuff. So I made the map for the main, plane of existence, and then I set up the location of all the different planes, sort of around that. So the big ones being like Elysium and Hades, the 9 Hells, Purgatory / Limbo, that kind of thing. And I kind of set up like which planes existed for us, for the group. And then the lore about each of those, most of them I just sort of left there. If someone came to me and was like, hey, I want a character that is aspiring to go to Mount Celestia when they pass, right? Or wants to be from Mount Celestia, then I would be like, okay, here's half a paragraph worth of lore that I've written on it. You go for it. Write the rest of it. It's all yours, right?
Yeah.
And I have that stuff sort of set up and ready to go for people to do that. And that's, I think, is just, it really helps me because I don't have a million hours of free time. I mean, I did at some point, but I don't have a lot of free time.
What, this isn't your full-time job?
Yeah, this isn't my full-time job. So I can't sit down and do what I did, especially at the early stages of the campaign, where it was right after I had lost my job to that wonderful, not actually wonderful pandemic that we had. That where I had a free day where I could spend however long it took, 3 hours or whatever, writing 10 pages worth of lore about the planes of existence and the deities that exist in the pantheon and stuff. And I spent so much time writing that, but I can't just spend a day doing that anymore. We have to sit down and we had to pick a day that worked for us to record half an hour's worth of podcast or whatever. And even then it still took a couple of weeks for that to kind of line the correct way. So it just isn't easy for me to sit down and write constantly for this campaign, but you can always have a moment of I could be at work and be like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then when I like think about it and I dwell on it, and then I get to my break and I write it down. In another fantastic tool, which is so simplistic, Google Drive.
Yeah, no
Like,
joke.
we have used so much of this. Like, I mean, I've written a bunch of stuff not only for your character but for other people's characters. Like, I have shared documents with a bunch of people. I have a bunch of maps in the Google Drive that everyone can see, and then I've got like all my notes that are not shared with anybody are in like another folder, and like it's honestly it is a lot of things that I've kind of done, but Google Drive has been really nice because I can access it from my phone, I can access it from my laptop, I can access it from my Chromebook, and I can always go on it in a different computer. Like if I was, when I worked an office job, I was able to go on my Google Drive and do things from D&D in that job as well. Like on a break or something. And it was really nice to kind of have the ability to have all that information in one location. And I think that's kind of big. You should do that.
Well, and it makes it accessible for players too. I mean, first off, I don't think pretty much everybody I know has some form of Gmail account, even if it's not their primary. So it gives everybody, and if they don't, you can still give public access. But it's a really quick resource. And if you're well organized with it, it's really easy to find what you're looking for as a player. And Google Drive is, I never thought it would be as useful as it is for D&D, but believe it or not, it's worked out pretty well. So
it's done wonders for us, at least, because it's allowed all of us to kind of just have a place where, and like even just the small things. Like I do a lot of making my like homebrew archetypes and homebrew spells and stuff like that. I was able to put all that stuff in the Google Drive, as well as all the maps and just a sort of a big page, a couple big pages or whatever, that was like one kind of went over all the planes of existence and the gods that existed inside of them, that kind of thing, as well as like another one that was like, here's kind of the basis of how the races kind of interact, and like the main ones of the world, as well as the major cities and who kind of resides in them, that kind of thing. And like all of that stuff is stuff that I did by myself, but that doesn't mean that stuff started out as full as it is now. Well, like when I first started, it was like every single god had a paragraph, right? And every single plane of existence had a paragraph, and then not even a paragraph. And some of them are like the Beastlands is literally 2 sentences. And then the same with like the useful things to know. I was like, well, these 2 races regard them in this way, right? But then when we got to the actual world building itself, when we were playing through the campaign and stuff, players and characters were allowed to make decisions that changed some of those. Not to spoil anything for when we eventually get there in the lore, but we just had a deity die like last session.
Yeah, it's rough.
And it is a change in pantheons. Like that is a big deal, and like that kind of thing just grows, and it grows entirely off of character decisions and telling that story together. Because especially with with that deity death, the player who was causing it knew it was going to happen, and like out of character.
Well, and let me tell you, knowing does not. I think there's this concern that having your players know things, especially big things like your actions are going to cause a deity to die. Mm-hmm. I feel like there's this idea of, well, I don't want to tell my...
It spoils the surprise.
It spoils something. Yeah. It really doesn't.
It doesn't.
Because first off, you've got 3 to 5 other people sitting at the table who have no idea. And it makes a good story. And there is something about... There's something about the statement, the deity dies, versus the DM telling the story and the DM... narrating that. There is a difference. It doesn't spoil anything. If anything, it increases tension. Knowing some things that I know are going to happen has not taken away my excitement for those things. In fact, it's probably increased it because I have something to look forward to. I have something to anticipate. I'm not in the dark. Because one thing that has happened at different tables in the past is you don't realize what your actions are causing. And honestly, sometimes, depending on the DM, depending on the situation, the scenario, it can actually leave less than pleasant feelings if you feel like you're out of the loop. That doesn't mean give your players every single info and let them know, okay, so you're going to do this, then that, then this. Because that's just you telling a story as a DM as opposed to you living a story with your players. But, throw us a bone every now and then. Like, we want to know things too, and then we can help plan if there's this big epic thing that's going to happen, or, even something small that we can make great. It gives us the chance to do that, and it allows us to share our creativity with the others, the others sitting at the table. And, I know some of the things that I've done, I've taken a lot of pride in. I've worked with my DM to come up with this cool story, and now I get to share it. So I think there's a joy there. You can kind of impart the joy that you feel as a DM creating things onto your players and allow them to experience that as well. And it's huge. And I honestly think something like that is going to open up more people into, the joys of DMing. And we all know there's a continuous shortage of DMs. So,
that is true.
Create one. Go. Give someone a chance to show them how fun creating can be.
I think such a great example, and obviously we will actually cover this more in depth, but there was a scene in Act 1 that I worked with a player for a long time leading up to. It was an interaction between him and another player. Those two worked on it a lot, and they worked on it with me. I knew what was going to happen.
And you still cried.
I cried like a baby. I knew everything that was going to happen. I knew that the scene was going to be very sad and tragic. I knew that it was going to be big. And I knew the outcome from it. I knew exactly what was going to happen, moment to moment. And I still cried because there's a difference between knowing that something is going to happen and then the power of that scene actually taking place. Another example being a character recently who had passed from your character's background. Who, you're already, it's one of those things where, you knew that death was going to happen.
Yeah.
And you knew that was coming. I had already laid out, okay, here's the song that's going to play. Here's when the scene is going to be awful. All that stuff. And then, when that scene eventually happened, it was still really hard to get through. It was tragic.
Well, and I think it's also fair to note, I knew it was going to happen. I didn't know when.
That's
and
true.
So you still managed to spring it on me, and it was like, oh no, this is the moment. This is the moment I've been frickin' dreading.
Yeah.
And I cried, and you cried, and it was horrible, and I was not over it for a minute. So
it's just I think even though we did a terrible job of really introducing this world, but
we haven't. We've just kind of talked about why collaborative storytelling is great.
Collaborative storytelling is like it's like how this world was made. It's how Dahlia got its start. I mean, Dahlia was not named as a plane of existence until this campaign. All of first campaign, it was nothing but Dramalo. It was Dramalo and then its surrounding regions. And it was centered around that. It was centered around a villain, and obviously there was a lot more fluff in it, but there was, it was centered around some specific points. And then when campaign 2 came around, I was like, we're going to expand on it. There's more places here that I think can be very, beneficial to sort of have. And so I started creating that world, and that's where Dahlia got its start.
And it's only,
and a half in. So.
Yeah, and it's only gotten bigger. And I mean, I played I played in campaign 1, and
You're the only
you know,
person who played start to finish campaign 1, other than myself.
It's been woof. It's been a ride.
It's
But
like 8 years, almost 9 years.
it'll be 9 years in October.
Yeah.
But you know, there is changes, and I mean, you know, I came in from campaign 1, which was a very different style of campaign, into the campaign 2 that you had sort of started creating, and then, you know, nose diving into let's all do this together was absolutely different, and definitely it has, as it's continued to be built, has, like I said, turned my experience as a player into something phenomenal, and given me an investment that, had I not had that opportunity, just wouldn't be there.
Right.
This in some way, I feel like, yes, this is your world, but I'm not just playing in it, and I'm not just a bystander.
Well, that's one of the things from this campaign that's really kind of picked up, is that it's not just my world anymore.
Right. I mean,
it's
literally
everyone's.
we've all put something into it. And not just with our actions and our consequences, but with actual physical writing, and here, let's build a pantheon. Here, let's build a continent. Let's come up with NPCs and relationships, even outside of our own personal stories. Mm-hmm. That has really made this something unlike anything I have seen at a table I have played at, and unlike any experience I have heard from, you know, what we'll call non-professional players, which is obviously the vast majority of D&D. Not everyone is Critical Role here. So, you know, I think adding in that element of collaborative DM really should be a goal. And you know, if you're sitting thinking, going, well, you know, oh, it's my story, and I'm the DM, and I'm supposed to be guiding it, and I'm not sure I want to share that, you know, maybe I don't trust my players with it, whatever, reconsider it. Seriously, give it a go. Especially if you have found a group that you trust, and you found a group that you are sitting back going, oh yeah, these people mesh. It will vastly make your players more interested. I know when we started this campaign, Austin, and we had the Discord, you had mentioned, I think even just a couple months in, that the Discord had been more active in a few weeks than it had for months and months and months in a campaign you played previously, because we were all invested, because we were all like, yeah, this is something I'm a part of. I want to see this to conclusion. And I mean, our Discord, and not just our memes channel, but, you know, the character insights, the general, the face claims, everything's pinging every single week. Every week we have something new to add, and it's off table. And isn't that amazing?
I mean, there are definitely things that happen on the table. Like face claims, I always do face claims at the table. Or most of the time I do them at the table. But yeah, it's one of those things where the Discord is... another great tool, honestly. It has been wonderful to have a place where characters can talk off the table, where they can, and players can discuss things, you know, off the table. Like, one of the things that I think really makes things unfun at a game and at a table was this past week we had an example where there was a riddle, and the party had to solve that riddle, and that was... that would have been really frustrating for you guys to have sat down at, you know, during session for like 3 hours trying to figure it out, banging your heads against the table, just like not figuring it out. And then like you might have left not feeling great, right? Where like,
and instead I got to bang my head at work and figure it out and feel really good yesterday when I got the last piece.
Yeah, you were able to do it, you know, with other people on the Discord, all of you guys at your respective homes or jobs or whatever. Together you guys were able to do that, and like that's, I think, it's definitely like a great way to help with the quote unquote like mechanics of your character being smarter than you are kind of thing, but also
it's a huge boon.
Yeah, it's just been really useful.
And you know, one of the biggest issues with D&D that I find most people run into, there's a few gems who manage it, but improving. is hard. So having a chance to sit at a table and, sit at off table, come together off table on a Discord and talk about what you want, what you're thinking, what your character is thinking to solve problems. Where are we going? What are we doing? Having that extra time between sessions really increases the verisimilitude, first off, and just generally the good feelings where I don't come to session and leave going, oh man, why didn't we do this? Or we wasted so much time doing, planning for this, but, when we didn't do it or it didn't happen. Having that chance off the table is just, when you've got a group that talks to each other and is invested, it makes a world of difference. And it makes the actual time you sit down at the table a lot more productive.
Yeah. So. And it also, it's a good place for, the Google Drive is also a good place for this because we've been doing both. But just taking notes or making character journals, which is another thing that we can talk about later. It's such a wonderful thing, but just having these retellings of the things that happen in the actual game itself, on a place where people can read it at their own leisure, or they can read it multiple times if they need to really remember, oh, this is what happened and now I can get into this mindset, that kind of thing. It is building a living, breathing world is a lot of work, but it's awesome. It's kind of what I want to poke at here. Yeah, so.
No, and it's made me, me as a player, invested enough that I want to share this. I want people to know, both DMs and players, this is the experience. This is an experience you can get out of D&D that I think people forget about. It's more than just rolling dice. It's more than just doing a funny character voice. It's more than just living in your own story. When you get the chance to collaboratively build, it changes the game entirely. And, I would hope that, one of the goals of this podcast when we're all said and done is that somebody kind of gets an opportunity, even just a foot in the door, to have that experience and have a chance to, spread the joy, I guess, So if nothing else, maybe someone will take it as an opportunity to either give their players the reins for a moment or ask their DM for the reins themselves.
Yeah, just giving it gives players more agency. It gives the DM more leniency. It builds a world collectively a lot better than I think a lot of DMs, or at least games, kind of end up being. Where it's no longer a board game, it's no longer just a story. It's everything. It is everything together. I think we're kind of past the time we wanted to be a little bit.
It's a pilot episode though, so you always go long.
But I think we've kind of covered most of what we wanted to do. We just kind of wanted to introduce ourselves. We wanted to talk about sort of the baseline of what this podcast is going to be, what the world itself is going to be, and then we'll kind of go into more in-depth stuff for later episodes. But I think this is a good place to stop. We've kind of come back full circle into this collaborative storytelling thing, and I think it's a good place to end it. Yeah,
no, for sure. So I guess here's the official welcome to Dahlia.
Yes, welcome to Dahlia. Your stay can be welcome, full of turmoil and sadness and lots of destruction and tragedy.
If you didn't like trauma coming in, you're gonna love it coming out.
You're gonna love the trauma. That's the tagline of the show. I love it.
He came for. Oh God, we got to come up with something.
What was the cake?
Came for the story. The story, or the story
game,
may
the
end.
The game may end, but the trauma.
But the trauma is forever.
Yeah. That was on my birthday cake this year. It was wonderful.
It's great. It's solid. I got a 1-up it this year too, or next year. God. Anyway.
Well, there we go. That's going to be the first episode. We're going to try and put this out as somewhat frequently as we can, probably once a week, hopefully.
Yeah.
It really just comes down to how much time we have to do editing and all that stuff. So, but we will see everyone next week, I guess, or at least hope
Yeah.
so.
For sure. Next week it is.
Bye, everybody.
Ciao.